I grew up in the panhandle of Florida in the 1980s. I was the youngest of three boys, and my father was a colorist at a local plant that manufactured wallpaper and fabric. He's a hard-working man, dedicated to his job and dedicated to his family. But on Friday and Saturday nights, he'd unwind. And after he had a few of what made Milwaukee famous, you could hear it. As me and my brothers went to bed, you could hear the vinyl top opening up. And my dad would put on his very favorite record. In fact, it was the only record my dad ever played. Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger. All right, Red-Headed Stranger, man. It is wild to consider that Willie Nelson was in his 40s when he released Red-Headed Stranger in 1975. Happens to be the year I was born, if I'm dating myself here. He'd already had a couple of decades in the business. He was actually under a lot of pressure at the time. He had just switched labels to Columbia. Like everybody else, he was looking for a hit, wanted an idea, and he thought about a song he used to play as a DJ in the 50s at a local radio station in Fort Worth. A song called Red-Headed Stranger. It actually turns out the song was written by a newspaper editor. Her name was Edith Lindemann, and when she wrote it, she was just toying around with the idea of colors. So she ended up with the Red-Headed Stranger from Blue Rock, Montana, a raging black stallion, and a yellow-haired lady. And Willie took that song and decided that he would build a story about what happened before and after the events of that song. What ended up unfolding to me was the greatest concept record ever made, and that extends past country in any genre. For me, Red-Headed Stranger is the best. Being that this was the only album that I knew of as far as an album goes growing up, it has set the bar so impossibly high. It was, this is what an album does. It tells a story this cohesively and this well. So it has created an expectation that for the rest of my life, I've judged all other albums on. Like, does it hit like Red-Headed Stranger hits? Which, that's not necessarily fair to a lot of other albums. Let's see, superlatives here. I would say, for my taste, Red-Headed Stranger Side A, for me, is tied for the greatest vinyl side ever. I would have Red-Headed Stranger Side A, and then I would throw Side B from Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, and another Bob one here, I would say Side A from Blood on the Tracks. Those are my three. Comes and goes, who knows, rankings are dumb, but right now that's where I have it. Thinking back on Red-Headed Stranger, actually the first concert of any note, not like some local music person, that I ever went and saw was Willie Nelson at Club La Vila on Panama City Beach. I must have been 13 or 14 years old, and Willie Nelson and family played poolside at this club. There was a bunch of dudes and mullets and girls in high-waisted bikinis, lubed up with SPF tan enhancer on the outside and Bud Light on the inside, and I got to watch Willie Nelson in his prime and family play, and I got to see my dad see him do Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. I'll always remember that. That was so cool. Another thing that sticks out about this record to me was forever there'd kind of been this mythical holy grail in our family that I looked for. My brothers recalled, they're older than me, about 5 or 6 years older, and my dad, that Willie Nelson had performed the album in its entirety on an episode of Austin City Limits. And it did not exist. I could not find it anywhere. I did a lot of research on the internet. I hit up a lot of like message boards and that kind of thing. to no avail, never could find it. I did eventually verify that it did happen. It ended up being the debut episode of season 2. Willie Nelson famously shot the pilot for Austin City Limits, but he came back and kicked off season 2 by performing Red-Headed Stranger in its entirety. I went as far as to even request that my local PBS have the PBS from Austin send the tape and they show it locally. I was told that that was the only way I could make it happen. That never worked. But then as a surprise for one of his birthdays, it's in the last 3 or 4 years, they put out that entire show on YouTube. It was amazing. I immediately went and saved it. And my brothers and I got to watch it together in its entirety. And that was just so cool. So, yeah, I'm glad to kick off Hillbilly Pillars with 1975's Red-Headed Stranger. For each album, I'm going to highlight one song and then put those together in a Spotify playlist that I'll link to under the videos that you can check out. For Red-Headed Stranger, I chose the penultimate song, and that's Hands on the Wheel. It was written by a relative unknown at the time named Bill Callery, and this actually highlights to me what might have been the most remarkable feat of Red-Headed Stranger to me as the years have grown on it. And that's having grown up with it. I remember when I learned in my teens that Willie had only written like 2 of the songs for the entire record, and that the rest were just pre-existing songs that he'd pick and chose and then pieced together so well to tell the story. It blew my mind. And it still does. I can't think of another concept record where you're telling such a fine story, such a finely crafted narrative, and the songs were specifically written for that purpose. But they were just, picked and chose to do it. It's really an incredible feat. And I don't think anywhere that's more highlighting than this song. The second half of the record has this real gorgeous redemptive arc, and the period and the pure heart of that comes to fruition in this song. So it's Hands on the Wheel.